We have completely reorganised those shelves behind me, but
right.
you wouldn't know because they're too distant.
Yeah. So what are they reorganised by then?
Oh, well, they were... That's the classics and modern classics section.
Right.
Downstairs. And it was... I hadn't kept it up to date, so there were new books that had been bought that should have been there, that were all around the house. So we put them in... Oh, and they're in chronological order, which is how I always... yeah.
What chronological order of you buying them, or chronological order of them being written?
Classics section is in chronological order of first publication of each author.
Ooh,
so it starts with the Greeks, and then moves on to Chaucer, at Cervantes, whatever, and through the centuries. So that was how I decided to do it when I got my first bookshelf, my first house, and I was stuck with it.
Well, my system is I've got some books over there with some other books, and then downstairs there's a few more books. I mean, it is a house that is full of books, but if you want to find a book, then good luck. They're all there on a shelf somewhere.
Yeah.
It's a bit like my life in general, to be honest.
I'm sure it's just something profound about me, but I don't know what it is. Because A to Z would be more... if I was just an ordinary nerd, if I had OCD or something, then A to Z would be... obvious, but I think my brain likes chronologies, likes timelines.
Right.
Yeah, I thought you'd be interested. This is gold. Put this on as a...
Well, I mean, I was...
a bonus.
Mine is sort of what fits on the shelves.
There's that too. I was listening to Marina Hyde and Richard Osman talk about this very subject on the Restless Entertainment, a podcast that receives just a few more listens than ours.
Yeah.
And Marina Hyde was saying that she goes for pre-war and post-war authors, and I have to say I was wondering about what would you do with George Orwell, for instance,
specifically not war,
who's both pre and post.
I thought you meant specifically not war. I either pre or post, but not.
Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, I mean, there's all sorts of
is that what you mean?
questions that springs to mind. Anyway, these are things that for them to worry about and not for me.
Well, at least hopefully no one's a psychopath that organises their books by colour. Spine.
I've seen it done in the wild. Only once.
In the wild? Okay.
Yeah, not, I've seen it on Pinterest and whatever, but not...
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Somebody I know has one feature shelf with it in rainbow order, but
right.
If you try it once, which I think I could accept, but not over an entire bookshelf. Or
yes,
yeah, that's where I draw the line. I've been checking the northern sector.
How's it going?
It isn't. These listening figures won't even start to grow.
What about the other sectors?
Oh, it's even worse.
Never mind, old chap.
We should never have come here.
Well, we didn't even have room for our own opinions before. Now we've got the Something Who bunker.
What's the point of making a podcast if it won't grow a decent listener base?
Richard's working on it.
Yeah, Richard knows we're beaten. He just won't admit it. Anyway, it probably doesn't matter anymore.
What do you mean?
Those people that I found this morning. Suppose they're spies of one of the big media corporations.
Richard seems to believe what they say.
Let's see if I've got this right. You brought your podcasters to this bunker just over 6 years ago.
Yes.
You set up your main series here with all your subsidiary episodes around it.
That's right. I made some preliminary recordings before I sent for the others.
And you were convinced that this television programme was suitable for discussion, despite the exhaustion of its listeners.
Well, worn-out listeners can be reclaimed, Rick, as you well know. We should have had a subsistence following within the year.
Exactly, should have.
The listener figures refuse to grow. We post an episode, downloads shoot up, and then wither. Again and again. There seems to be no reason for it.
Well, in theory, you should have a large following by now.
I can't feed my co-hosts on theories, Rick.
No, of course not. Well, in practical terms, what you must do is this.
Richard, quickly!
Can't this wait? We're just about to get a piece of advice that might change our fortunes.
But the Something Who bunker is under attack.
Attack?
By some kind of giant reptile.
On second thoughts, I think you're turtily done for.
Oh.
So, Paul, was that better or worse than Colony in Space?
Oh, well, it had brevity on its side.
Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed. The basis for that sketch, to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast episode 109, where this time we're looking at two stories with masterly intent. Initially, we'll look at Third Doctor out in Colony in Space from Season 8, and later we'll examine 10th Doctor story Utopia from Series 3. And with me to decide whether these stories have colonial style or require colonic irrigation, we have a fine gathering of pioneers. Starting with writer, board treader, and the man who knows everybody in fandom, Paul. Hello.
Yes, hello, good evening. Thank you for that glowing introduction.
Splendid. Next up, we have science and astronomy writer and occasional TV quizzer, Giles.
Evening all. Happy New Year. It's not too late to say it. Probably is.
We always have this debate every year, don't we? Happy New Year. And finally, we've got model panellist, Lego enthusiast, and monitoring the northern outposts of our podcast colony, it's Rick.
Hey! I think it is Happy New Year time. Happy New Year.
Oh, all right then. Happy New Year.
So we've got the little matter, I suppose, but let's do it briefly, of discussing the Christmas special and potentially War Games in Colour that have happened since the last time we were together. Any thoughts anyone has on that?
Yeah, they definitely happened. Yeah.
I would say about the Christmas special, I enjoyed it well enough, but I don't think I'll be racing back to watch it again. On the other hand, I suppose I probably could say that about most things Doctor Who-wise that I've seen in the last decade.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were bits of Go to the World I really liked, but it didn't quite measure up in terms of some of its parts. War Games, which I'm sure we'll come to in a moment, is just far more satisfying a watch than Joy to the World, all said and done.
I enjoyed Joy to the World all the way to the end, even though most of the nuts and bolts were very familiar from other Moffat stories. They were put together in a new way, and there were some new elements I enjoyed. It was not even the first time we've seen the Doctor get stranded somewhere, but it had a different take on it, and I enjoyed all that.
Yeah.
And I liked it all the way through, but I thought the ending was unnecessarily fantastical for my money, and the character arc, didn't do anything for me.
Yeah, I thought it was enjoyable enough, diverting enough for a Christmas special kind of thing. But that being said, yeah, I wasn't blown away by it, and it did feel like a remix of certain things that we've seen before. My favourite stuff was definitely the hotel scene, the sequence of him being stranded. I did rather think, can we just go off and have a story about Anita now?
Yeah.
Rather than have to go back to Joy and things, but
yeah, I mean, what with the God complex, we've had some good stuff in hotels. Maybe it's an area ripe for further mining. Regarding the War Games, I mean, what I thought I would probably feel like beforehand is I'd prefer a full 10-episode colour version. But you know what I'm like. If we'd got that, I'd still be waiting to watch it. And 90 minutes felt like something I could definitely invest. I really enjoyed it. I felt it got a bit relentless in the middle. And I chatted to our two guests a couple of weeks ago about that. But really, there was no other way to achieve the running time. And all in all, I really enjoyed the extra element that colour gave to it.
I'm looking forward to it, but tragically enough, despite their heroic efforts in cutting it down to a mere 90 minutes for me, I still haven't found time to watch it. Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
It's not on principle. I will.
In that case, we're getting to the naughty area of spoilers for a 60-year-old TV program, don't we?
Come on, there's no chance I've missed finding out all
54-year-olds. No, okay, fair enough.
Seconds later, it was everywhere.
Yes, yeah, that's all the stuff that I did not like. I bow to no one in my admiration for the colour elements of it. The colorization, I think, was great. I have severe misgivings about quite a lot of the other choices they made, unfortunately.
Mr. Mika's new canonical status.
Yes, yeah. No, I just don't.
Ethel, I'm not the master.
Yeah. I can't be having with that. I can't be having with a regeneration. Like, I can't be having with them tying up loose ends. I've gone on the record before about all of this. I like gaps.
Yeah, I like gaps, and I like the idea that the war chief is a totally different character. This idea that we should just reduce everyone to a limited number of characters because it looks clever. Jot doining,
Shot doining, doing the jots.
yeah, that sort of thing. I don't like. I don't like generally the idea that stories and narratives fold back in on themselves retrospectively. Like I say, I'm happy for the war chief to be a different character, and I understand that they're a short stepping stone apart in terms of the development of the master, but the master's a different character, and the idea that I think that there is a range of Time Lords who have chosen to break away from Gallifrey and behave badly is almost a credit to the Doctor, that somehow he's bucking that trend of people who have gone out into the universe to try and be kind and do good things. And let's talk about two stories that illustrate that contrast as well. But in terms of war games, it was so watchable. I thought they did a really good job in terms of just cutting out subplots. The story seemed to flow. I loved the colorization of the old episodes. And you said something, Richard, in the really interesting interview that you had with Rich and Benjamin, where you talked about how similar it looked to Third Doctor stories. And I've tended to go for that. Wasn't it a huge leap from the war games to Spearhead from Space? But I think just by colorizing the war game, it's a far bigger equalizer in terms of, these are very, very similar shows still at that point in time. And that was something that surprised me as a result of them colorizing it. And almost it was a shame that they did add such high quality new material, so that the TARDISes through the vortex, the base, were wonderfully realised, but did slightly look a step above the footage that they had from the 60s. That said, I was really pleased they used that YouTube regeneration. I enjoyed it when I saw it a year ago. Sometimes it's great to see people put material out there, it get widely appreciated, and then get used professionally. I thought it was the right thing to do, and I was impressed by it.
I'm still in shock over the loss of season 6B and the Scarecrow people. To be honest.
Well, season 6B, it's still. I mean, you've still got the original episode 10.
Well, exactly.
So you can decide which of them you prefer.
Yeah, true enough.
And there's still a potential gap before they tore apart. The frames you're going to slip season 6B in.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of frames is all you need.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
A friend of mine, Ian McArdle, suggested to me, he said what they should have done when they did the Too Old, Too Fat. Well, notably they didn't do Too Fat, but all that's that choice. He said what they should have done was stick in the Doctors that we never had. Some of the casting ideas. Mr. Pastry, Richard Griffiths. Then you could have kept the Too Fat line. Things like that. Would have been quite a fun idea.
Yeah. Yeah, nice idea.
Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed that. Thoroughly enjoyed your interview with them. Maybe we'll get a third. Who knows?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that afterwards. I was wondering about the War Machines in the end, because I thought it's interesting because it's right between the two. It's it's sort of halfway through the run. It's kind of quite modern feeling. The only extant Ben and Polly, fully anyway. So it sort of feels like Anyway, I mean. That was just another one that I might throw in the mix that I didn't think of when I was talking to them.
Might be, because I assume they've been going for a mixture of quality and importance, as it were. Notable stories in the notable firsts and lasts and things. But there aren't really any more of them, are there? If you can't have 10th Planet and Power, so.
Yeah.
Widen the net.
They're not going to do an Unearthly Child. No.
Yet.
Well, I thought it was rumoured a couple of years ago or whenever it was that we got the first one. I thought I read rumours that they had works in it.
Yeah.
And, presumably, if they had, it fell down the cracks where every other version of Unearthly Child has since fallen. So who knows?
Sadly, but so it's hard to the more you look at it, it's tricky to actually pin down things, and it also feels like there's a very limited number of ones where they've got large numbers of episodes that would actually need cutting down. I mean, it feels like cutting down a 4-parter to maybe a tight 70 or even a tight hour.
Yeah,
is a somewhat more manageable proposition.
Yeah. I mean, I'd have thought you could do an hour for a 4-parter, and it wouldn't feel quite as rushed. But you probably would get rid of some guff that the modern audience would struggle with.
And I think that's what came across in the interview, wasn't it? That they felt with the Daleks they were trying to give people slightly less of everything, but retaining everything. And you always learn from experience, don't you? That with the war games, I think they took a much better view that they were just going to hold on to that core storyline as best possible, and it absolutely zipped through that 90 minutes by comparison to the Daleks a year earlier. So that perhaps that's in their mind. How would they do that editing on that principle? What story would benefit from that? And that might be a determining factor for them.
How about a watchable version of The Chase? how long would that have to be? Like
5 minutes?
Oh dear. Even I wouldn't have been that cruel.
Yeah, you could probably do half an hour. I don't know.
That's the thing. I can't see them tackling the web planet, can you?
Tough. Okay, shall we surge on to our first story tonight? Talk about Colony in Space, written by Malcolm Hulke and directed by Michael E. Bryant, which, I mean, I first came across as a Target book round about 1975. It was one of the ones that I bought that first year I started reading them. I have to say it wasn't really even a favourite back then, but, I guess I enjoyed the book well enough. I don't think I read it more than once, and I used to read the Targets quite often, for those who think that I only ever do anything once. I probably saw it on UK Gold at the end of the 90s, and again would have watched it on DVD with my daughter sort of sometime in the mid to 2010s. Can't say that I went back to it with any great enthusiasm this time, but I'll sort of save my impressions till later. Who else has got something to say?
Go on, Giles.
No, I was only going to say, well, I had the book. I had a battered second-hand copy of like an early Black Logo edition.
Yeah.
I think I remember being because it was one of the ones with internal illustrations. I remember being quite enticed by those. I think somehow I objected to the fact it had the false introduction of Joe.
Yeah. I
think it bit in the same way that I used to never take to Doctor Who and the Daleks, because I was thinking, but this is wrong. In my sort of, teen and younger brain, was, objected to that sort of thing, knowing that it was an alternate take. So yeah, it never really got its hooks into me, got its claws into me, if you'll I'm looking at the cover as we speak. And yes, we just got the claws the wrong way up, I noticed.
Oh right, yeah.
They become sort of grasping claws that are holding onto everything.
Yeah.
In the cover illustration. But yeah, so it didn't really grab me then, and I can't remember. I don't think I saw this until the DVD came out, because it would have been. Apparently, it was 2001. The VHS came out in a tin with the Time Monster.
Oh my goodness! How irresistible!
A master tin. Yeah, that was definitely well into my wilderness years, and I suspect that was kind of at the fag end of the VHS range anyway, wasn't it? It was kind of when they... So yeah, I don't think I saw this until 2011 when the DVD came out.
Well, it's even later than me. I wasn't expecting that.
And then ironically, I watched it about 3 or 4 months ago for pleasure. or at least for diversion, on them. Don't want to show my hand on iPlayer for the hell of it. Was sort of going down byways and thinking, well, there's a story I don't watch often. It was just too far away, and because I didn't make any notes at the time, so I've rewatched it again now.
Lucky you.
I can't honestly remember when I first saw it. I did read the book in the mid-80s, early 80s. I didn't make much of an impression on me for some reason. And I either watched it in the late 90s before the VHS or maybe in the early 2000s. But I didn't buy the VHS because it was that late era where they started releasing the DVDs, which removed even though, I mean, the lineup of stories they had left was enough of a disincentive from buying any of them. But the fact that they had now switched to DVDs, just killed off any interest I had in buying the rest of them. Whenever it was, I watched it at a friend's house on UK Gold. I was staying with a friend. We watched one a day, and I found it tortuous back then. It's worse in my memory it's worse in my memory than I find it now, but not enough. Unfortunately, not enough worse. If you see what I mean.
Rick,
I saw it in 1989.
Wow.
I was living for a year in the United States and discovered that I had not one but two PBS stations that I could get. Both were running cycles of omnibus editions of Doctor Who. The circumstances were that I was staying with a family who went out to church every Sunday, which gave me the house, the telly, and the VCR all to myself for the whole of a Sunday morning. So I would record the two omnibus editions and try and force feed these episodes of Doctor Who into myself on a Sunday morning before they came home, which was okay if it was a week when there were two lots of four-parters, just about squeeze that in. But when a six-parter came along, that was a tight one in terms of when they were returned. And what I chose generally was the Pertwee run, because I'd never seen it before and was hoping it was as good as the Target books were, and the Tom Baker stories, Fourth Doctor stories, because I wanted to know were they really as good as I remember them being watching them as a kid. And I'm pretty sure Colony in Space would have been part of that run of Pertwees, and I had real childish enthusiasm for those Pertwees when I first saw them in the late 80s. They were just they were all I'd hoped that they would be on the back of the Target novels. So yeah, Colony in Space around about 1989 for me.
So I always, I think each time I've watched this story, even the first time, my reaction to the first few episodes is, this is better than I was expecting it was going to be. And then sometime round about episode 4, it all starts to become a bit more of a chore for me. I watched it this time in 3 lots of 2s, which probably helped a bit. But yeah, I mean, I think it. Well, I mean, it's a very lazy thing to say that it might have made a better 4-part story, because there aren't very many 6-part stories that wouldn't have made a better 4-part story. But yeah, there's a little bit of repetition in the last few episodes that can get you down. But I mean, there's some nice stuff in it, I think I would say.
I'm going to buck a trend and say I really like Colony in Space.
Good.
Right.
And I shall attempt to explain why over the next half an hour. But yeah, there are elements of it that are exactly why I watch Doctor Who and why I like Doctor Who. I do agree there is a bit of almost a flow of a tennis match between the Colony base and the IMC base at times, but I like the characters. I think broadly it's well acted, and there are some really fun bits in it.
I think every time I watch it, I find myself warming to it a bit more. Like, I can see there's stuff in there that, yeah. But there are things I can't quite get past, and maybe, yeah, they prevent me from sort of wholeheartedly. Like, I kept thinking, I should do some research into like exactly what the political parallels are and what's, where exactly Mac Holt was digging around, and was he doing parts like South Africa? Was he doing African mining stuff and so on and so forth? And then somewhere along the line, I lose enthusiasm for it because I think it's not quite good enough to justify the efforts of doing that extra mile. But it's diverting enough in its way. It's got its issues that we'll come on to, but yeah.
I want to say something nice about it, so I'm going to plump for the fact that it's well structured. I was struck this time. You see, my memory of it from the first time I watched it, which was only 20 years ago, so it shouldn't be as vague as it is, was that every episode was the same and nothing ever happened, and it was just all I remember was a film of quarry greyness and drear. But actually, it is very well paced across the 6 episodes. It's to the extent that I find it very boring. It's not because of that. It's not one of that subset of 6-part stories where they didn't even have enough plot for 4, let alone 6. And you just can't. And like episodes 2 to 5 are all spinning their wheels and nothing. I mean, there are some. We all know there are some where that happens and they're unforgivable. This reminded me of my surprising delight when we watched Invasion of the Dinosaurs a few years back. How well structured that is. How every episode has expands the world a little bit, introduces some new element, a subplot, a new character, a new twist, and it just keeps moving forward and growing. And I can't deny that it does that. Hulk paces it very nicely. My mate Mac paces it very nicely. It's a shame that even within that, there are some episodes where there's a bit of within an episode there's an escape, run around and get recaptured, which is unfortunate because he so nearly gets away with it being avoiding those sort of cliches. But yes, it does unfold, and it's a shame. It's a shame that you thought it fell apart in episode 4. I know why you thought it fell apart in part 4, Richard, but of course that's also when the Master turns up, and obviously the production team were hoping that would give it a lift, not because they thought that episodes 4, 5, and 6 were going to be the dodgy half of the story, and it needed a lift. They must have just thought, well, we can't fail if we just throw something else in to excite people, and yet somehow it doesn't, does it? I remember watching it with Mrs. Morris a year or 2 ago, and she was disgusted when it turned out to be the Master. She said, I knew it was going to be him, and I tried so hard to pretend that he wasn't, because of course by this point, is it the 4th in the series?
Yeah.
And even the most casual viewer will have spotted a pattern here. I know what's going on.
His picture on the front of the DVD.
Yeah.
I don't pay attention to these things anymore. I was multitasking while I was watching this. In the first scene with the Time Lord,
yes,
do they mention the Master?
They do.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's
right.
And that's odd. And
do they mention the Doomsday weapon?
Yes.
They do,
yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because of course I remember
that's the one other place they mention a Doomsday weapon until
exactly.
episode 6.
I was going to come on to that. In my head, I thought that was added in the book, but is it expanded? Does he make more of that in the book? The prologue with the
Yeah.
Do we get? What is the difference? Do we get a dramatisation of the Master stealing the files from the Time Lord archive?
No. We just get three people in Mrs. Farrell's CSO Time Lord kitchen.
No. I mean in the book.
Yes.
Sorry.
Has anyone checked it or recently? I would have done.
I think that's a greater amount of research than we were intending. Sorry, go on, Charles.
I mean, I don't.
Hang on.
I don't want to presage my biggest criticism and the one simple trick, life hack that they could have used to improve the story. But the fact is, famously, Hulk changed the title of the story, as he did with quite a few of them. Silurians to Cave Monsters, whatever. Invasion of Dinosaurs to Dinosaur Invasion, you see? People make whole YouTube videos out of how to improve your writing by recasting your sentences to make them more economical. But anyway, this one famously, Colony in Space is a very... Yes, of course that's not going to sell many books, is it? Oh, I love colonies. A colony in space is going to be even better than my I love any colony, but a colony in space, I've got to read this. No. But the fact that he changed the title does make me wonder if he realised at that point that perhaps there should have been a bit more weapon and a bit more doomsday in the story throughout. But I can't imagine he there's much he can do to change that in the novel, apart from the title. But if I'm wrong, please, as usual, write in to Richard.
I believe it's like the prologue involves them sort of discovering the theft of the...
Right.
So there's some discussion of the Doctor and the Master, and then they discover that the files have gone missing.
I would go and check the purple shelf of my book collection, but as you know, I don't sort them in that way. In any event, it's probably in the loft.
Well remembered, though. One of the few purple. Or is it? I think it's more sort of plum.
Yes, I think you're right.
But it's definitely
purplish. Yeah. I mean, it's nice. I mean, as we've just been talking about the war games, it does build quite nicely on that. There's a couple of times that the Time Lords are sort of referred to, I guess as observing but not getting involved, and having sort of being quite powerful in some undefined way. And of course, Malcolm Holt was half responsible for the war games. So yeah, there's a nice bit of continuity there, having just watched it.
And it's the first time we see the Time Lords in their war game style again, isn't it?
Yeah.
And they're in the same sort of style again in Three Doctors,
Yes.
which leaves the bloke in the bowler hat from Terror of the Autons as the odd one out.
It's the odd one out, yes, yeah.
And basically, that's the difference between Terrence Dick's Mac Hulk Time Lords and Robert Holmes Time Lords, I guess.
Though that Time Lord was being incognito on Earth,
of course,
just as any everyday Brit would have been.
Yeah.
And completely changing his personality would be nothing like any of the other Time Lords we've ever met outside of a Robert Holmes story.
The Time Lords were really going for it, weren't they? They were saying, the Doctor resents his exile bitterly, was the line they put, which suggested they were kind of spying on him from afar.
Yeah.
And then they kind of spoil it by then saying, we must restore his freedom. Well, they didn't restore his freedom. They hijacked his TARDIS with him in it, sent him to some awful clay pit world, and sent him straight back again. And didn't restore his freedom. But apart from that, I quite enjoyed the little Time Lord interlude.
Yeah.
It's not entirely surprising. I mean, no, this isn't the reason that Hulk chose to write in Jo Grant as if she was a new character in the book. That's a bit short-sighted, isn't it? That just think they'd never do Terror of the Autons. But because it's her first sight of the TARDIS, first trip on the TARDIS, first alien planet, it isn't incongruous to make that change to it being her first story. It sort of fits with what we actually get, doesn't it?
I like that whole start with Jo. She teases the Doctor and really winds him up, which I was like, I think the third Doctor wound up, using him and being a hobby in a game. And then she really effectively goes through that, oh my gosh, it's real.
Yeah.
I don't really like this. I don't want to handle this.
Yeah.
It feels like she's going to get a really great story. One of the things I don't particularly like about Colonial Space is she just becomes every week the damsel in distress, which kind of lets down a really strong first episode.
The first few minutes of the first episode, when they arrive on Luxarius, it feels a bit Hartnelly, a bit like it feels like the Dead Planet to me. I mean, I was thinking this seemed familiar, and then when she picks up the brightly coloured alien-esque flower, that's all very Nation, and and the mysterious savages watching them from the in the background. It's all very and Doctor looking at rocks. Oh, and even down to the fact that he was rather selfishly wants to go and explore rather than...
I feel like that her line should have been, though, when she went into the TARDIS, it's very slightly bigger on the inside.
This is the first time we see the TARDIS interior in colour.
Yeah, I mean, you can just about go around
the war games aside.
Yes, you can just about go around the back of the console. It's still green. It's so early.
It's one thing to leave it green when that was only an artifact of the black and white television production, but to keep that bloody photographic wall when... I suppose it doesn't look any less convincing just because it's in colour, but somehow... I mean, technically it shouldn't look any worse, but it does, doesn't it? I mean, what were they thinking? This is the only time we see that wall in colour, right? When do we next see the TARDIS? It's not...
Well, it's in Day of the Daleks. Was it before that?
Oh, I have no idea.
I think it might be Day of the Daleks.
But it sort of gradually improves, doesn't it, from here?
Yeah, it has that odd variant for the Time Monster.
Oh, the washing up bowl.
Yeah.
Well, I'm the only person in the world who likes that.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, that's quite cool.
There's some oddities. Am I right in thinking they turn the lights down when we see the Master's TARDIS, don't they? So is that the start of that trope of him having a black or at least darker TARDIS to make it look different? It may be a coincidence if they don't do that again until the 80s, but just wondered if that all started here.
We've already seen his TARDIS in
inside?
Lords of Axos, haven't we?
Hang on.
Well, what did it look like? Did that have a photo wall?
I can't remember.
There's a question.
The Doctor seems to know planets by sight. There's a very misty ball turns up on the screen. And he says, "Oh, look, that's Uxarius."
Yes, yeah.
Although he doesn't seem to know whether it's got a breathable atmosphere or not.
No, or anything else about it. So
yes.
What's the point?
Whether it's
what the point of that line is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like the periodic table. He just sort of learnt. He had to learn planets by sight in the academy.
How much? All right, I'm going to go there. How much better would it have been if, as well as knowing Xerius, he knows what it's famous for? That's the legendary planet of a legendary weapon. It's so legendary that it may be a myth. We don't know. And then he'd get there and think, maybe it was a myth. There's obviously no secret weapon here. And that could have kept some mystery bubbling along, rather than it being a complete ass pull in episode 6. But just a thought.
Yeah, I wonder whether in the first episode they're obviously starving to death, the colonists.
Yeah,
he proclaims himself to be some agriculturist expert, whatever, and that kind of then sets that up as potentially being. Well, he's going to work out this mystery, and the mystery is going to be connected to the Doomsday weapon. But again, it doesn't play out like that again. That first episode promises a number of things that then it doesn't carry through in the remainder of the story. And like you say, Paul, the Doomsday weapon gets mentioned at the start, and then very, very late on.
I mean, I do like the world building. It does all evolve nicely. Yeah. I just personally find the characters unengaging. And the oddest thing, this may just be me personally, I know there are a lot of Doctor Who stories that don't have enough women or any women in them. There are some classics in the Hinchcliffe era where there are not a single female of the species is to be found. But somehow it really annoys me in this one. And there's actually more women than I remember, but there's 3 in the first episode. One of them is offed very quickly. But the fact that it's because it's a colony and they're all men annoys me. And it's just so
imagine it annoys them.
And so unnecessary. Yeah, quite. I mean, of all the reasons this colony is going to fail, the radioactive soil, there's another one staring them in the face that they don't seem to have thought
But have you
of.
seen the men? I mean, is it any great surprise that there weren't women, running to join them in their colonising efforts?
Well, if that had been deliberate, but it unfortunately is just 70s everyday sexism, isn't it? It's just
so that aspect of it, yeah. Yeah.
But again, there are 2 very capable female characters in that first episode.
Yes.
And like I say, they never make it beyond that first episode.
Well,
the other thing that I did read, though, was that the character Morgan was originally supposed to be cast to a female actor.
Well, that would have been great, because that was going to be Susan Jameson, wasn't it? Yeah. She was actually cast and contracted and everything. Mrs. Wibsey, as she later became, but obviously... Great actress, and she's on the she's Mrs. Ash. They obviously stuck in as a little in joke.
Oh,
the picture on.
Oh right,
I see.
The picture on Ash's desk of his presumably late wife.
Right,
right,
is of her. Apparently.
Shouldn't it be Audrey Roberts? Oh dear.
The idea pop off. Yeah. So
who's the other woman who's in the first episode? So she doesn't turn up again.
Yeah, there's the woman who returns or the actress that returns in The Green Death, who is clearly one of the ones that goes out hunting and generally taking care and protecting the colony. And I don't think she doesn't get killed. I don't think she just doesn't reappear.
Is that because I also saw it pointed out that Michael Bryant's wife has a cameo in the last episode when there's colonists wandering around,
right?
Wearing some fetching leather boots. She's in there as at least an extra supporting artiste.
I wasn't going to mention this because I didn't think it was a very strong point. But as you've mentioned, Suzanne Jameson, the fact that they paid her and wasted an entire salary, I am going to mention it. They do seem to have been a bit profligate with their budget at times in stories. I mean, having the Brigadier in parts 1 and 6 and those 3 Time Lords that are in one scene and then disappear, the 2 colonists that get offed. I even thought of it again. It's completely unrelated. There's some interesting bits of set and props that look quite expensive that turn up and disappear. And those chambers in the Master's TARDIS where they look very expensive. I was wondering if they came out of nowhere. And then some of the props that are rather more important to the story, like the Doomsday Weapon itself, are
absolutely
slightly more Twin Delivery.
Well, they obviously unexpected costs.
Well,
Susan Jameson's fee was because Ronnie Marsh apparently vetoed it. Said you can't have a woman in jackboots and being going around. It would be kinky.
He obviously didn't realise how earnest the script was.
Well, yes, quite. The fact they put a nasty ding in one of the halflinger vehicles, despite having been told to keep them pristine. I think when they dropped the polystyrene rock on top of it,
turned it over on its side.
Pertwee's driving it a hell of a lick at one point as well in one of those.
Oh
scenes.
Yeah, that's one of the things I quite like about it. It's quite dynamic in that sense.
Yeah,
I want to just say a few things in support of the episode, and I think the world building is really excellent, and it feels like a big production because there are lots of people, lots of characters in the story, and often Doctor Who gets itself in a situation where there are 2 active forces, one of whom the Doctor sides with. So it's an us versus them situation. And as much as the IMC versus colonists dominates much of the 6 episodes, there are actually lots of different forces at play. There's the colonists who, in Ash and Winton, have 2 different views on how they want to behave and lead the colonists. You've got the IMC, who themselves have 2 opposing forces within it, with Caldwell versus Dent. You've got the Master on his own agenda. You've got the Doctor, who flits between the various stories, factions throughout the episode, and you've got the activities of the natives and the Tupa race and the Guardian. And I think that does allow the story to survive because it keeps flitting between these conflicting interests just enough for me to see me through those 6 episodes.
Yeah.
I think that's really unusual.
And Roy Skelton.
Yeah.
The Norton character in it as well.
Oh, was that him?
While he's there.
No, I entirely agree. It's got all the elements are there. He's put it's yes.
And yet.
So I feel churlish saying that.
No.
All the clever planning and arranging and all this complex matrix of viewpoints, it should be more engaging. But somehow, the actors are fine, but it just doesn't.
You've got that thing with where you talk about the world building, Rick. And you get this idea that Norton could just turn up from somewhere else on the planet and have walked for a long time, because it's a big planet. I mean, it must be probably about the same size as Earth. It's got the same sort of gravity as Earth, so it's probably pretty large. But then, although you've got that, you've also got this sort of strange thing whereby, I don't know. I mean, as far as we know, most mining sort of happens in smallish areas. The minerals are sort of constrained to a particular area. Is it not possible that they could maybe go off somewhere and farm it where there isn't lots of the mineral? It's a big planet. I don't know. That bit is kind of, and why have they chosen to farm right beside where the Doomsday Weapon is? I don't know. So, but then we don't know how big it is. I mean, the colony might be enormous. It might be utterly vast, because they talk about the northern sector and whatever, and we don't necessarily get a sense of that. So it's just it's a little bit hard to envisage just quite what's going on in terms of area.
Norton stretches my suspension of disbelief. He seems to get away with plenty. Which the Doctor, for instance, as Test Subject 1, doesn't get away with. He's regarded with suspicion from moment 1, really has to prove himself. Norton walks in playing the starving
Yeah.
colonist, last survivor card. Loads of awful things happen, including the power getting sabotaged and somebody getting killed and a native getting killed when they've shown no signs of being anything other than collaborative.
Yeah.
And no suspicion at all for that happening coinciding with his arrival. He really sticks around 4 episodes before he's rumbled, and
then dies immediately that he is rumble.
Yeah, and I think Joe has a kind of an eye roll at one point about Norton thinking, "Well, come on, why isn't anybody else saying this?"
Yeah.
Whereas it's rather contrived the way they continue to be suspicious of the Doctor after 3 or 4 episodes of him helping them when he's become essentially accepted as being on their side. All it takes is the adjudicator to turn up, and suddenly he's able to throw suspicion. You don't know who this man is, and they go, "No, you're right. I'd forgotten that. We don't know who this man is. The Doctor's been helping us for 4 weeks." And also, when we get to that, the various inquisitions, one of them with the adjudicator, and I think also the other one that the IMC captain is leading.
Oh, well,
there's endless variations on. But do you have any proof of this? Do you have any evidence? Oh, what? No, I don't actually, because I just find that sort of thing slightly tedious. We get it both sincerely and insincerely from the master, but that just winds me up.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, we get a nice little line in there. Jim will fix it, they say, about the guy who's doing the electrics. I mean, it's 5 years before that program happens, so it's just an entirely,
complete coincidence.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Gale who says it, isn't it?
But it's quite nice that there's this sort of moral argument around people making grey choices. I mean, the Bernard Kay figure, certainly for a couple of episodes, he's not quite clear which way he's going to go, and you can sort of see that he's a bit more soft-hearted than the other members of the IMC, but at the same time he's had to make a few compromises along the way, and he's not going to be a soft touch.
I think he's a brilliant character.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the one element that really sticks with me in terms of Colony in Space. I think he acts the part really well. He just about stays the right side of credibility in a Doctor Who universe in terms of those moral and ethical dilemmas. He tries to play it in terms of his help to the colonists as subtly as possible, takes his opportunities to help them when he can. The tolerance of his colleagues in the IMC, Dent's hardened, awful, amoral captain, somehow keeps giving him second chances, whether that's because he has skills that they need to see them through. But Caldwell, I thought, was really, really well positioned as a character, really well played, and like I say, one of the more memorable cameos of that era for me.
By far the best thing in it.
Yeah.
Very lucky that the best actor and the best written character coincide.
Yeah.
Bernard Kay has served the programme well. In his 4 roles, they've been good roles, and he's really played them well.
One thing that I picked up from the production notes that somewhat transformed the way I looked at this is we all look at it and think, oh, it's horribly 70s. Everyone is looking horribly 70s, and every aspect of it, like all the hair and the beards and so on. But apparently they had quite a. This is giving me flashbacks to when we discussed the beard and wig budget on King's Demons, but apparently they had quite a large budget for the old postiche on this too, and so an awful lot of this stuff is deliberately being added. So they are very consciously. It's not just a bunch of rather lovies who this is how they look normally. They are consciously being made up as space hippies, and even old what's his name, Morris Perry, as Dent, like that. That's a wig. And to give credit to David Brunt, who did the production subtitles on the DVD. But apparently there's a story that Katie encouraged everyone, just by way of relaxation, to turn up for presumably a camera rehearsal, just mucky around. So they're all camped up, wearing various bits of things. She turned up wearing one of the beards stuck on. Someone else turned up in a dress and so on. Barry came down and laid down the law and said everyone was being silly. And then Morris Perry turned up and got taught a new one by Barry Letts, apparently. And that he was just wearing the wig that was assigned to him. Obviously, looks at it as that takes the biscuit.
So,
and it is quite, it's odd, but the fact it's conscious rather than just being a sort of hangover from everyone being a bit 70s. And
I like the idea of Barry Letts playing Graham Chapman, playing whatever that character is that Graham Chapman plays. It's all got a bit silly.
Yes, this is silly. It's all a bit silly. Yes.
There are lots of things that I'm pleased survived 500 years in outer space, and my favourite thing is those tear off calendars.
Yes.
If that really is going to be true, I'd buy a share in the company that makes them now, because that's a winner.
Yeah, Vidi printers as well. Yeah, they've come back, and tapes. You get a nice little tape with the stuff from the Adjudicator on it. Not quite sure where that's come from.
So another thing I like about the story,
Go on.
I'm still trying.
Yeah, no, we love it.
Is I like when Doctor Who mimics how kids play, and this is full of it. When I think about when I was a kid, all the kids in the street would play in the street back gardens, where we would have two teams vying to attack each other's bases, and it's just like this. This is how we would do it. We'd have shootouts like the shootout scene. We would have somebody sneaking round the back of their defences to win the day. We would have people having to be rescued from having been captured. We'd have awful kung fu kick and ridiculous staff fighting, and we'd have pretend things for boulders. It's all there, and I think as a children's or a family program, when kids see that, they can absolutely relate to it, because that's how they play, and there's something very innocent and joyful about how Holiday in Space is staged and how they move from one conflict to the other. I'd say just takes me back to my childhood, and I love it.
Yeah, I mean, they even have that thing with the IMC guys where they say, "We're going now. Bye. Now, bye.
Yep.
Well, that's it. We're going. Yeah. You won't see us again." And then they sort of sneak round the back. Yeah, that's nice.
But the whole ludicrousness of the IMC just take off and land where they don't think anyone can see them with their spaceship, and that the colonists get into the spaceship and leave immediately without anyone noticing. It's brilliant, It's child's play, and like I say, ever so often, you sit down and watch it. It makes me smile.
One thing I noticed for the first time, it shows you how observant I am, is that in the opening title sequence, it goes straight. The Pertwee thing goes straight into the diddly dums. So thus far, it's gone dum de dum, dum de dum, dum de dum, dum de dum, and then it's gone diddly dum in the fifth bar. The Pertwee theme omits the first four bars. Just goes straight in with the diddly dums.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. I'll have to investigate further and come back to you on this. other treatments, but yes, it's just.
Well, they fiddle with the title sequence a lot, don't they, in the previous series? And so many things they seem to have forgotten how to do, like how the TARDIS materializes and dematerializes.
Yes.
It's either they've forgotten everything, or they are entering a brave new world of experimentation.
So it's interesting because the opening effect of the TARDIS door has got the Dalek city sound rather than the thing.
Oh yes, of course.
However, that's exactly the same sound effect that's in the War Games for the opening of the TARDIS door. So when they forgot it, it wasn't in 1971; it was in 1969.
Interesting.
Did nobody else find it unintentionally amusing when they keep going on about security guard Alan, whichever episode it is?
Alan!
He was my favourite. Security guard Alan, hello, this is security guard Alan. Come in, receiving. Security guard Alan.
Was that Terry Walsh?
I didn't look. I was too busy working on the floor laughing.
I just loved
laughing.
because I loved.
His mud bath.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. They definitely went for it.
Because this was Michael Bryant's first story, wasn't it? And Graham Harper was involved as floor manager, because it is reminiscent. Whether it's just the fact they use projectile weapons, it does give us an Androzani-esque.
Yes.
And I guess it's also that cowboys and Indians thing that everyone says about it, sort of thing. But the fact that you've got projectile weapons instead of zap guns, I think is a bit of a saving grace. It gives it a bit more grit, and I think the location work. Although it's a quarry, it's a mighty impressive quarry by Doctor Who standards, so far as you can go. I think there's a lot to it, and it's quite impressive. All these the individual shots of when they're driving the halfling things around and all of that malarkey.
Yeah, I like those buggies. I like them zipping around. The quarry has real height to it, so when the natives are coming over the top, and indeed the colonists at the end, that looks really impressive. And I love a doorway in a rock.
Yeah.
One day when I know I've made it in life, I'll build a doorway in a rock that takes me somewhere great.
Okay, to take you somewhere. I thought you were just going to say just to wind people up, you'll put a doorway in a rock somewhere.
I've always fancied an underground base, just to let you into my psyche there. I thought not to be a supervillain particularly, but just
that's how I got into the Something Who bunker.
Yeah.
Don't give away everybody how to get in.
All of which possibly brings us on to the underground base,
right? And
the sudden jolt of tone, which I would argue possibly. I'm not sure. I'm wondering with our discussion. I'm thinking, okay, maybe there's a really good four-part, because considering this was originally called Colony, I think when it was originally was the working title. Whether there is just a really good four-parter that is just much tighter and is just about the colonists versus the IMC, which is really what Mac Hawk seems to be mostly interested in.
Yeah.
Which maybe just misses out all the Doomsday Weapon alien city shenanigans. Because
three separate species or three mutations of the same species.
Yeah, because I just feel like it's just not developed well enough. You don't get that it's dropped on us, and the interactions with so it's a nice bit with Jim Holden. I think that's the name of the character, who only gets one scene working with the Uxorian who's helping him without, and then I think he immediately gets off by Norton in the next scene, so we don't get to see any more of it. But it feels like, either show us how they are interacting with these natives properly, because there's a very strangely offhand way, and you'd think that Malcolm Hulke, with given his credentials, was literally a card-carrying communist, would have perhaps thought a bit longer and harder about the way that they were representing how they were, how even the colonists were dealing with, and the fact that everyone just acts like, okay, they can roll in there and just assume it's effectively a barren planet with nothing.
Well, this whole primitives thing, right? So in episode 1, nobody calls them anything. I mean, they are, creatures on the planet, but they don't have a name. And then Norton turns up, and in episode 2, he starts calling them primitives. And then Joe joins in, and by the end of the episode, everyone's calling them primitives all of a sudden.
Is it Norton that does it first?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then even in episode 4, even the Doctor starts calling them primitives. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know if this is Malcolm Hulke just sort of, trying to say that, once people latch onto an idea, they all become,
What a wonderful idea.
But
it's not.
But it's it's just like a sort of virus because everyone sort of seemed quite happy to take them on their own terms to start off with, and then as soon as it's suggested that they are primitives, everything, they're just primitives. So
I think it's more likely that in television writing, when you're writing at speed, you have come up with a name for this thing, and which you used yourself, and then at some point it drifts you probably have plans to drip feed your terminology into the script, and then you forget, and it just suddenly it's there, and
ends up in the mouths of all the characters.
It happens all the time. But I like I wish it was what you thought. It'd be a more interesting story, wouldn't it? So how many levels? To what extent is this a satire and/or critique of colonialism, and on how many levels? Because you just mentioned the fact that our hippies, our colonists,
in their own right,
are so sure that this planet is, they've got the moral high ground when IMC come because they got there first. Except of course they didn't get there first, but so we don't see any adjustments they make in their dealings with the natives.
Yeah, I mean, they're sort of like this, that maybe the missionaries or something like that, they sort of, in the sense of they sort of feel like they are, that they're on the side of right, but when it boils down to it, actually, they're relatively self-serving in a number of ways, whereas at least the IMC are sort of nakedly looking after themselves.
The story doesn't seem to be particularly critical of the colonists. It's certainly not compared to the hippies in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, who Hulk really has it in for naive idealists. Whereas these people clearly have good reason to leave Earth. They're not just refugees or religious or political. What's the word? They've left because Earth is borderline uninhabitable.
Yes, and also I think
they don't play as a commentary though for most of the things that we now hold against colonists. So they're not missionaries. They're not trying to convert the natives to their way of living. They are not stealing resources from the natives. In fact, quite the opposite. They seem to be feeding them on the side. And they're looking for coexistence with them. So
just want to be
it's not a huge dig at the behaviours of empires or colonists. It seems to be more a reflection on. You're
right. They're played very straight, and the satire is all on the side of the evil capitalist conglomerates, isn't it? Very clearly. So it is us and them, to return to our original point.
Yeah.
So they're perhaps more like the Pilgrim Fathers in America, or the people who go down to South Africa, because they're not trying necessarily to convert the natives, but they are escaping because they're being, the conditions at home aren't all that great.
No, it didn't work particularly well in those two instances, did it? For the natives.
In the end, you're right.
I think the other thing which is a moral statement is there's that constant battle between Ash and Winton in terms of, do you try and find a compromise, a solution through talking, or do you just shoot your way to dominance? And Ash sticks rigidly to painfully at times, we've got to talk this through, we've got to trust the adjudicator, we've got to do this, do the other. And it's his self-sacrifice that ultimately is the winning turn for the colonists. He is, in many ways, almost the action hero of the story. That's absolutely their turning point. And so perhaps, Malcolm Hook thinks, let's, out of all these various characters pulling things in all these various directions, ultimately it's Ash who I want as my hero.
Yeah, I mean, on the subject of heroes, is it just me, or is the Doctor pretty unlovable in this story? I was just thinking about Pertwee and his moment of charm. I couldn't think of a moment of charm in this one. I mean, he's not awful, but he is quite rude to quite a lot of people. It's not Pertwee's fault. I think he's playing the role as written. Doesn't have a lot of geniality in it. Maybe that's Matt Colt's way.
No, and to be fair, I think you're right. He gets involved in the toing and froing and the rescuing and particularly of Joe, but he doesn't actually achieve much during the episode. It's only really once you get to the Doomsday Weapon where he has the courage and know-how to flick the self-destruct that he plays a really active part in how the piece ends. And just on a quick aside for that, if you're going to have a self-destruct mechanism, I think it'd be a bit more complex than the one bloody handle that's sticking out prominently from the control panel.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe a slightly longer fuse as well.
Yeah, I'd be worried if my fridge had a function like that. Just be bloody go every time.
Yeah.
I assume it's the design of the science fiction half of the story that is one of the main things people think lets it down, if it's not the tedium. But I always liked, and I guess the primitives don't look that great, but when I used to see the colour, the photographs, photographs of the alien priest, and possibly even the little thingy, the little one, when I was younger, they were some of my favourite Doctor Who designs before I saw them moving. When I think there's a lot of great colour. Why am I saying colour pictures? It's in colour. In Doctor Who magazine in the early days, and I was really looking forward to seeing these alien priests. They had quite a haunting. It's a nice design. It's It's not just a.
Is it in the monster book as well? Maybe?
Changes the shape. Yeah, and yet, unfortunately, when they're trundling around, they're boring corridors. The effect is somewhat diminished, and of course, the puppet is only slightly better than that. Puppet in Blake 7, if you remember the one.
Yeah,
it's not quite as unpleasant.
It's all a bit Three Doctors, that city, really, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? That's what I thought. It's a shame. Some designers don't seem to quite know the best way to make something look, I don't know, fantastical on a limited budget, and just.
I'm also thinking, I mean, I'm cutting a bit towards the end of the story. It's just as well that the brig moves out of the corner of the room, because he's standing where the TARDIS has gone, and then apparently almost immediately the TARDIS returns. And if he hadn't sort of, wandered out of that corner, could have been the end of him. I mean, it doesn't sort of, materialise into place. It's just 1 minute it's not there, and the next minute it is.
Did anyone like his joke about the Spanish ambassador?
Yeah.
That was fun, wasn't it? A bit of an in-joke, I guess. Well done. So there were things I liked about it.
I also thought that the Doctor, who bitterly resents his exile, took it all rather well when he discovered that he was right back on Earth, precisely the point and place where he'd left.
Yeah, they didn't make
up with the Brigadier again.
They don't make much of a deal out of that, do they? Does he refer to it at all? The fact that is he?
Yeah, that Witty or the Brigadier wouldn't understand if we told him that we.
Do we see his reaction? At what point does he just? At what point does the Doctor discover that this TARDIS hasn't been returned to him and it was just a one-off, or does he assume that once he realises the Time Lord sent him there and it wasn't a?
I think he's sort
all
of
dealt with in the first episode. Doesn't matter.
I think
he knows
it's
from the
episode
start,
6.
doesn't he? Because he walks into the TARDIS and the TARDIS takes off without him pressing all the right buttons. And then I guess maybe he thought at the end of it, having done the bidding of the Time Lords and thwarted the Master, he might get his TARDIS back. But no, he gets the Brigadier back. A poor second.
Yeah, I don't think there's any. Yeah, looking at the transcript, I don't think there's any real discussion of it at the end. But anyway, so I can't quite work out when. I guess it's all front loaded.
So, according to the readers of Doctor Who magazine, Colony in Space is a solid 21st out of 24 John Pertwee stories in every poll.
Blimey. Okay.
I'm trying to talk it up. Have you got any drains of kindness towards this story?
Is it higher or lower than Monster of Peladon?
I was going to say, what are the three that are lower?
Either one of these was the last Pertwee. They were the last two Pertwee stories I saw, Colony in Space and Monster of Peladon. I can't quite remember what order they were in. This might have been second to last.
It's definitely better than Monster of Peladon. It's definitely better than the Time Monster.
Yeah.
Well, I have a strange fondness for the Time Monster.
Oh, really?
Which probably, even though I can tell this is better, I suppose, on paper.
I mean, it's probably better than the Mutants.
See, I have soft spots for all these stories. Time Monster, I can have a good chuckle through. I really like the Mutants, and that really does get a caning off Doctor Who fandom. So here we go. Here's the three beneath Colony in Space. At 22, the Mutants. Tick, you're right there. 23, the Monster of Peladon. Tick.
Yeah.
And 3 for 3, the Time Monster, Rock Bottom.
Yeah.
See,
And
the,
those four
yeah.
have been rock bottom in every poll.
Well, I mean, the thing with Pertwee is that being the worst Pertwee isn't a bad thing, really. I mean, there are definitely other eras that have had a greater concentration of dross. So yeah, I mean, there's no time lash in any of that, or time in the Rani. He said, exposing his prejudices.
Yeah. I mean, Colony and Mutants are definitely very worthy stories, both in the derogatory sense, they're so worthy, but I mean, they are serious pieces of work. Time Monster, I think, is so mad that I give it a pass, and maybe Monster Repellent is the only one that's lazy hack Doctor Who and doesn't deserve us being too soft on it.
Oh, I'm going to have to agree with you, Paul. It's annoying.
And also, it's such a disappointing follow-up to the all-time classic Curse of Peladon. I like the bit when the Primitives are doing their Tuscan Raider Sand People impression.
Oh, yes.
It was just Star Wars for 10 seconds. They stood there on top of the cliffs, waving their spears in the air, going, Well, they don't make that noise, obviously, but in my head they did.
Yeah.
Those little buggy things look a bit like land speeders.
Yeah, I do wonder whether...
It is quite clearly an inspiration, possibly the main inspiration for Star Wars, 1977.
Yeah. They fight with
or
staffs.
a coincidence.
Yeah.
The Doctor grabbed the staff a bit like a lightsaber. The baddies wear helmets because they're all the same.
Yeah.
There's the bit where John Pertwee says, I don't seem to remember ever owning a toy.
Yeah.
That was
The
a dream.
Guardian's just a bit of green paint away from being Yoda.
Well, you know. How about the... Oh, good Lord. Well, the Leesons are... arguably, there's a bit of a parallel for Uncle Owen and Uncle Boo there, isn't there?
Oh my God, they are.
It's a total rip-off, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't recognise
domed
John Tordoff there.
A domed
Lucas!
residence.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the whole faked attack thing. But,
There's lots of people watching this in 1971. It goes from 7.6 million to a high of 9.5 million, but most of them are sort of in the eights. You know, it's a... I don't know what the ratings were for TV in general, but it's pretty good.
It's funny because it's in the middle of this. I meant to sort of mention this earlier or come back to it, but it's funny because it's right in the middle of the series, and yes, it almost functions as a not quite reboot, but a bit of a restatement of core concepts. It's funny that it comes
like they have in the new series when they talk about a second. What do they call it? Not a second pilot, but a second launch.
Yeah, I suppose maybe it is
mid-season.
that sort of mid-season thing. When was it? April? It was broadcast. So, but yeah, it does feel a bit like that because you suddenly have reintroduced all these things that get shown from Joe's point of view. Yeah, I just wish that the whole Doomsday Weapon thing was a bit better thought out because it's odd that they briefly give us a tease of it in the first episode. And then the fact they don't introduce it at all, the idea that there's a Doomsday Weapon doesn't, unless you remembered that bit with the Time Lords from 5 weeks back, this would be completely like, what? Where? What?
Yeah.
There's no discussion of it at all. And then it's solved by them saying, oh, well, we'll just self-destruct ourselves. No.
Yeah.
I think even in your putative cut-down version of this, whether it's 4 or 5 episodes, you'd need to keep... There wouldn't be enough science fiction if you didn't keep the Doomsday Weapon. Although quite how you'll keep that without having any aliens, I don't know. But I'm not going to talk about it for too long because
my preferred version would be the one where the alien civilization is properly worked out, and there's a bit more understanding how the colonists are getting on with or not getting on, interacting with the natives, and possibly a bit more commentary on that side of things, and we get some hints that there's a Doomsday Weapon somewhere before halfway into episode 6.
I've been trying to work out what it reminded me of, the silent natives that have agreed to work with being used as servants, and then it's turned out that they have a telepathic.
I've seen
telepathically, and I've just realised it's Kinder. So it's not that similar, but just in certain areas, the native handing you the scientists' tools, and
I've seen people throw
strong and silent.
I've seen people have mentioned Beneath the Planet of the Apes because of the alien mutants or the mutants in their radiation-soaked city underground. But I can't quite remember.
To be honest, it could almost do with being longer if you were, because the structure, there's enough material to keep the colonists and the capitalists story going for 6 parts, so it might have needed another couple to really do justice to the aliens. I know, I can't believe, shoot me now. I can't believe I said that. But,
I tell you what, you can watch that version and tell us how good it is. But I think on the whole, Rick, you've done a decent job, as far as I'm concerned, of reminding me, I guess, of the good parts of the story. Yeah, maybe next time when I go to watch it, I won't be thinking. I won't have a heavy heart when I stick the DVD in or go to the iPlayer. I'll be thinking more fondly of it.
Excellent.
Can I give a little shout out to the fact that I suddenly realised in episode 6 that it's a preview of the Master in Legopolis. The whole thing about, okay, if we've got this weapon, we can rule the universe together, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's slightly odd that he's going to off the Doctor an episode and a half before, with a bullet. Because sharing, I mean, there's been a bit of that sharing thing earlier in the season as well. So it's...
They have such a complicated relationship, don't
they? It is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other things anyone wants to say before we put this to bed?
I quite like the little nod with the Crab Nebula being that they get the astronomy wrong, the sun won't blow up. But I quite like the idea of the Crab Nebula having been a test run of this thing. I did also.
And that's wrong, is it?
Oh well, Crab Nebula is a supernova remnant, and the sun won't go supernova. But that's just me being nerdy. I did also wonder with the Guardian of the City, what do we call him? The top one, the little guy. Anyway, I wonder whether there was some little nod to 2001 going on there with the idea of the higher evolutionary form going back to being like a fetus-like creature, some sort.
Yes, if we're going to get really nerdy, the Guardians in Green Lantern, who look after the power that goes in the Green Lanterns, they're little blue squat creatures. It seems like, if you're going to really evolve, you have to shrink a bit, don't you?
Okay.
And have a big head like the Mekon.
Big head, yeah.
Big head.
Or a baby.
That was the thing I made a note about, and that actually does strike me as being a moment of levity for Pertwee, the bit in episode 4 where he does the magic trick.
Oh yes,
with the primitive, which I think was all done live. That was all because he picked up a bit of prestidigitation while working the halls back in the day. So that's quite a nice little moment. I quite like it when the silly voices and things like that come through. Not that he does those in here, but he lets a little bit more of the entertainment side of Pertwee come out.
Yeah, it's not a great story for John Pertwee, is it? He does get to do driving around for his action scenes. It's interesting that when he first meets Caldwell, and it's kind of an uneasy, do I trust you, do I not?
Yes.
He somehow drives the bloody vehicle.
He's the one that drives the thing, yes.
Yeah.
And Pertwee tells them to slow down, doesn't he, after they've been attacked? They must have hated saying that line.
Yeah.
Okay, well, look, we will be back with thoughts on Utopia soon.
Great.
Yeah, I know. It's a cliffhanger of utopian proportions. That.
See what you almost did there.
Yeah. Okay.
Lovely.
If we're good to do the sketch, Paul, you have the first line.
Yeah. Who am I playing? Is it Ash or his mate, or whose name I can't remember. Is it?
It's the guy with who's man and his wife in the.
Right. So
Leeson and Mrs. It's Leeson and Mrs. Leeson. So Giles, you're Jane Leeson, I think.
Oh, great.
But I think in this you can just be Giles.
Please don't let me.
I can't remember what he sounds like, so I shall just invent a characterization on the fly. Here we go.
Something who. Okay, well, look, we will be back with thoughts on Utopia soon. But for now, we're going to go into I've even forgot what I say at this point. But anyway,
into a tunnel. Yeah, we're going to
pause
so
at this
might
point
lose reception
and come back soon with the remainder.